I'm Kirk Degiorgio, DJ and producer, and I'm here again for Sonic Academy to give you a quick tutorial on Ableton's new CV Tools pack. It's a Max for Live pack that you simply download from the Ableton website and then install as you would a normal pack. And then what it allows you to do is send DC signals from your Ableton live sessions through your audio interface to either your modular system that uses CV gates or any analog synth that also uses CV gates. Now, there are a couple of things that you're going to need to check out before you get into CV Tools, and that is you need to look up to see whether your audio interface is DC coupled. DC, without getting into too much technical info, is the sub-audio rate signals such as LFOs or clock rates, gates, triggers, etc. And those are the signals that you'll be passing through your interface. So you need to make sure that your interface doesn't filter this out. DC on some interfaces is filtered out because it can be damaging to the internal circuits. Now, even if your interface is DC coupled, like my trusty UAD Apollo 8 here, which is DC coupled, you need to make sure that you get the right cables. Now, this is what you need. These are called floating ring cables. I don't know exactly what that means, but I do know that you need to use these, as I say, even if your interface is DC coupled. I have found out the hard way in the past that DC, if you don't use these floating ring cables, can still damage your audio interface. So make sure you get some of these. They are available online from various sources, but I do know Expert Sleepers make some up ready-made. So go get those. So that's what you need to do. Make sure your interface is DC coupled and get yourself some floating ring cables. Then get onto Ableton's website, download the CV Tools pack, install it as you would any other pack, and watch the tutorial and you'll be ready to go. So we have a blank Ableton session here, and if you go to your places in your browser and then go to packs, here you'll see CV Tools. It's a folder that has 3 subfolders within it: CV Instruments, CV Modulation, CV Utilities. Now we're only dealing with sending CV from Ableton via CV Tools out of our interface into our modular system. In this tutorial, I'm not going to deal with sending CV the other way around, and that's because you need specialist equipment to do that. Have a look at the Expert Sleepers modules, and they do that job very well. But most ordinary interfaces, in fact, I think probably all of them, filter out DC signals from going into your interface because they can damage your audio interface. Okay, so bearing that in mind, we are just dealing with sending CV from Ableton into your modular, not the other way around. Okay, also another thing that I'm not going to cover, some of these CV Tools Max for Live devices are not dealing with sending CV to your modular. They are mimicking the kind of modules that you get within a modular system. One of these would be your rotating rhythm generator. So we're not dealing with that here because that's just mimicking what you can do with a decent module. We are specifically dealing with the Max for Live devices within CV Tools that deal with sending DC, that is CV, from Ableton out of your interface into your modular system. Okay, right, so what you'll see on my modular system, you look in the screen within the screen, on the left hand side you'll see a buffered multiple module by Fractals, and you'll see I've got 3 cables going into the inputs. Those 3 cables are my 3 CV signals that I have got coming out of my audio interface from Ableton. Okay, so watch for those. And the reason I recommend sending your CV signals to a dedicated module is because when troubleshooting, you want to visualize something to give you a handle on what's actually going on. It's really handy to have a visual recognition that you are doing things correctly. And that's exactly what I get with this module, because it has 2 LEDs to show positive and negative voltage. So I should be able to see that I'm correctly sending the CV from Ableton into that module correctly. And I'll show you this now. If I drag the main workhorse of CV Tools, which is CV Instrument, if you drag it into a session, it's a Max for Live device, so it will take a second or so to load up. But there you go, there's CV Instrument. And what I'm specifically going to explain first is the routing, how you get the CV out of your interface into your module. Going down to the bottom here, you'll see CV pitch 2. Now the first drop down box gives you external out and then some other options. So I'm going to choose external out. Now here's where my interface has a little quirk, but I'm glad to say I've done some research and many interfaces also have this exact same quirk, so it's worth explaining very carefully. My audio output number 1 at the back of my interface is what I'm sending my CV signals to, but within Ableton that audio output is not number 1, it's number 3, and that's because in Ableton, outputs 1 and 2 are dedicated signals, audio signals to my monitors. And what you do not want to do with DC CV signals is at any time send them directly to your monitors. They can very easily damage or destroy them if you have the volume up. So that's something you want to avoid at all costs. And I'm glad to say that Ableton are aware of this and have made this kind of foolproof, because if you see, this second box here is still grayed out when I choose external out. It doesn't default to master or outputs 1 and 2. That would send the CV or the DC straight to my monitors and possibly blow them. So it's very good that they've done this, because then you choose your second one and it's pretty much, you can't, choose 1 and 2 by accident. So number 1 output physically is actually the software output number 3. So I select that. That will come in to the very top cable on my Fractals buffered multiple, as you'll see. If I now just play on my keyboard, if I play middle C, you won't actually see the LEDs light up. That's because within CV Tools, middle C is actually 0 volts. Now, if I play up the keyboard, you'll see a red LED slowly start to light up and become brighter as I go up the keyboard and the voltage increases. And we get the same if we move down from middle C, we'll start to see the yellow LED get brighter. Okay, so you see there that we've successfully got our CV pitch going into the module. Obviously we haven't hooked up any audio yet, so you won't hear anything, but that is why I recommend going into a dedicated module with this kind of setup, so you can visualize what's going on and make sure everything's working as it should. Similarly, we have our gate signals, and we do exactly the same. We choose external out, and then I choose my second analog output, which is going to be output number 4, and that will go onto the middle jack that's going into my buffered multiple. So now what you should see, if I randomly play on my keyboard, you should see the gate light up red and the CV go yellow if I'm below middle C and red if I'm above. Okay, excellent. Now we just have to set the audio, and that's very simple, very similar process. Audio from. Now the audio, the software numbers do correspond to the physical inputs on my interface. So my inputs are number 5 and 6, and I choose 5 and 6 as the audio input coming in there. Now, if you have a 0 latency way of listening to your music while you make tracks, like I have with UAD's console, you will want to disable the monitoring so you can monitor via that. But what we have to do here is actually leave monitor on for now, because we want the audio to be routed into this CV instrument, because we need to calibrate our first oscillator, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, now we're going to do the calibration of our oscillator. As you can probably hear, I've got a low square wave going into the output of my modular. I can just turn the volume down a touch here so it doesn't become too annoying. And we'll quickly get into the calibration mode. You simply press calibrate. Now, a lot of the first instructions we should have already done, i.e. plug an oscillator into an audio input. Well, we've done that, and it says sine, saw or square work best. Well, we've chosen square, so we're all good. Click next. It says select the audio input you've plugged your oscillator into, and we're coming out of a stereo output module on my modular, so we're coming in via 5 and 6. Click next. It says patch a pitch CV output and connect it to your oscillator. We've already done that. It's going out on number 3. And well done, Ableton. Again, they've just done another warning here. Sending CV signals to speakers can damage them. Clicking next gives us the actual tuning. Now it says adjust the pitch of your oscillator until the tuner turns green and says C3. Okay, so we're an octave and it's a little bit flat down, so let's quickly adjust that. Okay, you'll see we're dead on C3 here, but what I'm going to do to make sure I'm getting very accurate is drag one of Ableton's excellent tuner modules here, volume back up. You see here we're still a bit flat, so I'm going to just tune that so it's exactly C3. Okay, let's click next, and it says click the button below to begin calibration, so we should be all ready. And there we go. Let's just turn the volume down. What it's done, it's created a voltage table that compensates for any sort of voltage tracking anomalies in your oscillator, and that should now, we should have a usable range between C-2 and E7, so that's 9 octaves we should be able to play in tune. That is pretty incredible. Let's see if it has actually worked. Well, look at that. That's amazing. Okay, so we've calibrated our oscillator. And let's get ready to further explore CV Instrument by expanding the display and getting into the envelope, shaper and expression. Okay, so I've just expanded out this patch a little bit, still keeping it very basic. It's just to demonstrate what happens if you run out of envelopes. This CV instrument comes in rather handy. As I showed you, you can collapse this triangle or open it up, and it gives you 2 envelopes, a shaper and an expression module, and some mapping, which we're not going to go into. We're just going to focus on the envelope, shaper and expression here. And I'm going to send this envelope 1 to the 3rd input that I have going into my Fractals buffered multiple. So I choose external out. And remember, we've got our CV on 3, our gate on 4. Our gate is now going to a ADSR module, which is opening a VCA, and we're going to choose 5. And this is going to the frequency cutoff of our filter. So I can now use this software envelope to control the modulation of the filter cutoff. Okay, very straightforward, but very handy because you can never have too many envelopes. So if you run out of an ADSR module, you've got 2 that you can use within one CV instrument. And I'm sure you can start to see now that the first problem you're going to have with CV tools, probably the only problem, is that you're going to run out of outputs on your interface. So maybe you can use aggregate device with 16 outputs, say, so that you can get 16 outputs going from Ableton into your modular. I have just got 6, actually. I reserved the other 2 for my audio outputs going to my modular. But that is going to be the main issue, I suspect, because as you can see now, if I put that back to no output, we've also got this excellent shaper module, and I can do the same, assign that to output number 5, and now I can modulate the cutoff using this shaper. So if you can see, what we've got here is a rate that is a division of the master tempo. So if I bring in a kick, or if I stop that and I go into hertz, you can have it free running. You can even use it in octaves and semitones here. Let's keep it free running and you can see we've got a sine wave. And we've got crazy stuff like miss. Slow that right down. And you can actually go in and draw your own shapes. Excellent stuff. And you can smooth out some of those more abrupt modulations there using the smooth feature, or have them hard like this. And you can make the effect a bit less subtle by lowering the amplitude. And you can make this shaper unipolar, which means it will just send out the positive voltage only, not the information that's in the negative half. Okay, so that's a really handy shaper that you get included with CV Instrument. Let's turn the output off there and go into Expression. And this really gives you very common MIDI features that you regularly use within MIDI sessions. It enables you to get them within your modular. So we can even control our filter cutoff with keyboard velocity. So you'll see this bar, if I lightly touch the keyboard, see there, it indicates how hard I've hit the keyboard. And you've got mod wheel and your key tracking, which is usually input to filter cutoff, so that the higher you play up the keyboard, the more open the filter sounds to mimic the behavior of some acoustic instruments. Okay, so that's 2 envelopes, a shaper and expression. And if we go into our CV modulation folder, we have something quite similar to our shaper effect here, and that is a handy LFO. Again, you can never have too many LFOs, so if you run out of an LFO module on your modular system, you've got a really quick and handy way. You just assign an LFO to an external out. Again, we're using the 3rd input on our Fractals module, and there we can control the filter cutoff via the software. Again, you can take down the depth, and you've got an offset here, so you can again go in bias towards the more positive or negative. So a very handy LFO feature. And finally, what we're going to look at is these CV utilities, and basically I'm going to focus on how to get a clock and a reset signal to take over the tempo and the stop and start of an external sequencer in my modular system. So I've changed the patch once again, and now I'm going to drive my Fractals Uster sequencer using CV clock out from CV Tools. So I drag an instance of that into my Ableton session. Now I'm not using CV Instrument anymore, so I've got a separate audio track with my modular audio coming in there. That's why that's in record. And now what I'm going to do is use the first input now of my buffered multiple that is going into my clock input, the external clock input of the sequencer. So I now to choose external out and choose number 3, and that will now send a clock. Okay, now if I want that clock to restart back at the first step every time I stop and start Ableton, I use the transport button here to choose external out, and this is going to send a trigger each time or a gate, and I've found that it works better with a gate. It's something to do with the width maybe, and I'm going to send that to the second external clock input on Uster, which is actually the reset input. It's not a clock input, it's a reset input. So now every time I stop and start Ableton, you should be able to go back. Okay, so it restarts every time. Okay, so now we're driving our sequencer. We can go back to maybe our CV modulation and drag a CV LFO here, and then we can assign our 3rd output here. Let's open the envelope release time so that we can get some nice random kind of lengths going on. So if I change sine to random, let's see how this sounds. Let's do it to divisions. actually of our clock. There we go. And we can offset that. That gets a little bit more subtle with the depth. Changing every 16th. You can start again. Excellent. So there you go. That is a very quick and basic look at Ableton's CV tools. Very useful if you have a modular system and you want to control everything, including external sequences like I've just shown you, all from within your Ableton Live session.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.